Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Cap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome everybody to Season 4, Episode 5 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Football Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we help you prevail throughout the 2024 fantasy football season. I am your host, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me is Nick Cap. Alrighty, Nick. Week 2 of preseason. I think there were some games last night. We're recording on Saturday, August 10th. We're almost there. We're almost there. We have a mock today. We have another mock for you guys.
Yeah, listen, I think everybody's hyped. We're very close to football season. We're in football season. If you're a preseason guy, we pay attention for fantasy, of course, but we're 1 week closer. And 1 week closer to football is another week closer to happiness. And then misery, because, you know, it's miserable managing a fantasy roster, but it is the greatest misery that you can have.
Injuries starting to pop up as well. Nothing super duper notable for us to talk about. We would kind of only mention something if it was season ending or if they would miss the first month of the season, but nothing super duper notable at the moment. But it is something for all of you to monitor. Make sure you have your notifications on. Make sure you're following fantasy apps. Follow us on our social media so you get notifications if any big news does pop up. You could be drafting on a random Tuesday night and then player X breaks their leg and you don't want to draft them. So there you go. I know Andrew Luck retired, feels like 10 years ago at this point. I know it wasn't 10, but it was something like that. And I know a buddy who drafted him an hour before he retired. So hopefully your fantasy drafts are at the end of August like they should be. We have a mock draft for you guys today. It's our mock draft 3.0, or mocking from different spots than we have done the last 2 mocks. So I'm going to give you guys a mock once a week just so we see how the board kind of changes over time and how our opinions also change over time as we get news from camp, news in the offseason, and we watch these preseason games. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Football Podcast. You can find us on all major audio streaming podcast platforms. We are also on YouTube for your audio and video format. And you can also find us on all social media channels. We're live Sunday mornings during the NFL season on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. We don't have a time for that yet. It's probably going to be somewhere around 8 a.m.-ish, early in the morning, to answer your fantasy football questions, our favorite shows that we do every single year for all 18 weeks. I think it's 18 now with buys. I think so. All right, let us get into our mock draft 3.0. Nick, have you done mocks this week? What have you been doing?
Yeah, I've been mocking it up. I enjoy them. I got more leagues than I think I've ever done before, especially more high stakes leagues. So I've been from different slots, some startup leagues, a new dynasty league, which I've never done before. So it's definitely been interesting. The board has definitely started to change a lot over the last few weeks. Especially with some of the injuries, some Brandon Ayuk news. We see a lot of the 49ers shifting around the board. So definitely been interesting.
So obviously Christian McCaffrey is your 1.01. If you listen to the show for a couple of years now, I don't want to say I'm anti-McCaffrey. The injuries do pile up, but obviously the running back one last year, do I think he finishes as the running back one this year? No, because I love to play those the fact that we haven't seen a running back one repeat in back-to-back fantasy football seasons in over 20 years, I do love that stat a lot. It just shows that injuries happen and that running backs break out, and it is a position that does kind of go up and down over time. But if you are the 1.01, you just have to grab McCaffrey. There's really no other debate. Those other receivers are just excellent players, but McCaffrey's your guy if you have the 1.01.
100%. And Nick and I, this time, we're going to go from the 1 and the 12. We're going to show you different strategies when you got the turns of the draft. That's typically an uncomfortable spot. Usually means if your league carries over year to year, you were the worst or the best in your fantasy league. And it's hard to keep that momentum going, especially because it's hard to find value when you got to keep reaching down the board if you're not taking the best available. In the 12 spot this season, I do think wide receiver is significantly more valuable. So I am going to go with my guy, Garrett Wilson. I've been mocking him a lot at the end of the first round. I think he's going to have a stellar season. He was great for the last 2 years. I believe over the first 2 seasons of his career, he has the most targets of any player ever. So that's definitely a good stat. And when your quarterback play gets this much upgraded, he's going to be a high projection for me. And then I'm looking at running back. I do want to go hero RB because there is a massive drop off from the first 2 rounds. to the three, pretty much through the six. And I'm in between Saquon Barkley and Kyron Williams. Nick and I talked about in our top 5 offenses, we think the Eagles are going to be phenomenal this season. We think that Saquon is going to be a real difference maker. DeAndre Swift last year had one of the best seasons of his career, honestly, and he had the most yards before contact. Saquon Barkley getting the best offensive line of his career. I'm going to lock him in as my hero RB here.
Saquon's becoming my favorite second-round pick, I think, as time goes on. I don't know if I'll get him in a league, but he's easily becoming my favorite second-round pick. So kudos to Nick for making, in my opinion, the right decision there. And if you do want to learn why we have the Eagles as our number 1 rated fantasy football offense, go check out last week's show. It's available on our YouTube channel and audio streaming platforms. Top 5 and bottom 5 offenses to avoid and offenses to target. But today we're basically talking about players we want to target in our mock draft. I'm not going to talk a lot about players that we want to avoid. So here I am at the 2.12, I guess, and here's the drop off here. There really isn't a lot of options. But here's what I'm going to do. I know that I'm on the wrap. I know Travis Kelce is 35, but he's still Travis Kelce. He's still Mahomes' number 1 target. I'm going to get my tight end out of the way. I don't like a ton of the running back options, and this is where things get really tricky, and I'm going to explain it to you. My next pick is going to be 412. So I would love to go for guys like Joe Mixon or Kenneth Walker. Those are James Conner. These are like my slam dunk picks that I like in the middle rounds. I don't have a receiver yet. Some receivers I like. Mike Evans is still Mike Evans. This team would be a very bad dynasty team for a 1-year redraft league. I'm looking at stars. McCaffrey, Travis Kelce, Mike Evans, 3 guys who have just been Mr. Reliable for the past 10 seasons. I see no reason why Mike Evans isn't getting 1,000 yards. I see no reason why Kelce isn't still the number 1 option. And I see no reason why McCaffrey still isn't a top 2 running back in fantasy football. So I'm okay with where I'm sitting after 3 rounds.
Sure. Taking a look at the top of the board now, like I mentioned, you do need to reach a little bit when you're at the end, because if you want to find value, it's not really as easy to find when you're in these wrap positions. You want to be in the middle of the draft, so you get those guys that fall further than they should have, or guys you could reach on a little bit more. The end and the front are really tough to do that. But there is one guy that I think is way too low on boards, and I imagine 2 weeks from now is going to rise because of the Puka Nacua injury. It is Cooper Kupp, who the offense in preseason and in camp has been running through him just like it has. We talked a little bit about it on last week's show, which we've already plugged. The Rams offense, I think, is electric. I think they're elite. Cooper Kupp is a great value at this position. He's been a Triple Crown winner, a Super Bowl MVP. And this was all in the last couple of years. It's not like he's so far removed from that. And I would hate for one small injury that sidelined him for a couple of weeks to let his value fall that much further. I imagine by the time the season rolls around for these later drafts, he's probably a full round earlier. But at this point, if you're drafting this week, he's a value. So go ahead and slam that pick home. And I do like going wide receiver heavy. I do think if you're at the end of the draft, you do need to take some of those onesie positions, whether it's the quarterback or tight end. You want an elite guy. I think Nick made the right call there by drafting Kelce there. Because you really need guys that can finish one. I'm confident Garrett Wilson could finish one. I'm confident Barkley could finish one. The 2 quarterbacks that I do like to finish one are Allen and Hurts, which are off the board. And I don't love the Patrick Mahomes value here. I think Lamar is a fine play, but I think looking at the board and based off the mocks I've done, I'd rather shore up my RB2. And James Cook is a screaming value right here. In the past, I believe it's 75% of running backs that have had their wide receiver 1 leave the team have seen at least a 10 to 20% uptick in production. So James Cook, I do think, is going to be the biggest benefactor from Stephon Diggs leaving. And right now he's going off the board way too late in the 4th round. And his projections middle of the 4th round based on ADP and rankings. But last season, I believe he was the RB11 in full PPR. He heated up on the back half of the season. He was one of the number 1 options for Josh Allen. So I'm easily going to go with who I think is another top 10 offense in Buffalo and clearly the best skill position player there at the moment.
So I mentioned that I was hoping guys like Joe Mixon or Kenneth Walker would come back to me so I could get a surefire running back too. I'm going to take Kenneth Walker. I think this is an offense that needs to really lean on the run. I know it's a new coach. I know it's not the Pete Carroll system anymore, but Mike McDonald's coming from the Ravens, who were a run-first team or a defensive-minded team. Geno Smith has played very efficient football over the past 2 or 3 years, but he's not going to throw the ball a ton. Geno Smith's not going to throw for 4,000 yards and 35 touchdowns. This is a run-first team. This is a team that can control the clock. They will be behind the games. That is the one worry that I have. But everything else tells me that Kenneth Walker in the 4th round is a really solid pick. So I'm happy to put him on my squad. Then we're looking at wide receivers. And I do prefer targeting wide receiver 1s, but there's a bunch of really talented wide receiver 2s here. Devontae Smith, Zay Flowers, Tank Dell, T. Higgins, Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen's a little bit further down the board. It's a little bit of a risk here, but I'm actually going to take Keenan Allen, and here's why. I think he's going to end up being Caleb Williams' safety valve, at least for the first 8 games, and maybe further on. That Bears offense is really tricky to figure out. I know Odunze is getting great reports from camp, but so did JSN for the Seahawks last year. The Bears traded for Keenan Allen to get another target for Caleb Williams. He came coming off an 1,000-yard season, one of his best, if not his best, statistical fantasy football season of his career. I really do want to take Devontae Smith, talking about how explosive the Eagles' offense is going to be, and the same thing with T. Higgins, who I think is going way too low at the moment. If he stays healthy, a lot of yards and touchdowns are going to go T. Higgins' way from Joe Burrow. So I would have been cool with any of those guys, but I did reach down the board a tiny bit to get Keenan Allen, who I think could be the wide receiver 1 over there with the Bears, at least for this season. Next year, again, this is a terrible dynasty team we're looking at. My average age has to be like 28 years old. Doesn't matter. 1 year looking to win a championship.
I like it. And I think that's what you need to do. You got to take risks. I think Kenneth Walker is the right pick there too. So like I mentioned before, you really want some of these onesie positions. I was really hoping Kittle or Pitts fell to me.
That was really tough. That tight end round right there, they all just went. And this will happen in your draft. So sometimes mocks are a little wonky, but these 4 tight ends here, that's exactly what's going to happen in one round of your drafts. And if you're in a 12-man league like we're mocking here, I bet it's around round 5. And that's pretty correct in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I was praying one of them fell because I really wanted them to be the difference maker. But now I'm in a little bit of a jam here because I don't love Anthony Richardson at this ADP, even though I do think he's going to be good for fantasy. Joe Burrow, I've watched too many injuries to trust taking him this early as a quarterback without taking a backup quarterback, which I don't really love doing. I think you can find enough streamers. So I'm going to buy a little bit of time here, and I'm going to take my guy who I think is a massive sleeper in Rashee Rice to be my first flex play. He was the wide receiver 4 from week 10 on last season. He was absolutely dominant for fantasy, and I think we're forgetting about it because of some offseason issues. And right now, to get a guy going into year 2 with Patrick Mahomes as his quarterback who was that dominant that early on in his career, I think that he's a smash play. I think we're doing what happened with Alvin Kamara. We thought that the 3-game suspension was going to hinder him. His offseason stuff would get in the way. It did not. The 3-game suspension got pushed back a season, which looks like is going to happen for Rice at this point. So I'm very happy to take him there. And then I am going to go for a onesie position here. Even though I would have liked Pitts or Kittle, I do think Evan Ingram was a great tight end last season. And you have Calvin Ridley, your wide receiver 1. Step away. I do think that presents some more opportunity for Ingram.
All right. I'm actually okay with targeting a quarterback here since I'd like to get a guy who's going to throw for a lot of yards and just really solidify that position. Looking at some good stat sheet stuffers here with Joe Burrow and Dak Prescott. I am partial to Joe Burrow. I kind of always have been. I know he's had a couple nagging injuries. I'm okay with taking a backup, knowing that an injury could happen. But if Joe Burrow is healthy, this is one of maybe, 3 quarterbacks in the league that could throw for 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns. It's really him, Mahomes, and I don't think Josh Allen can do it anymore, honestly. It might just be him and Mahomes that could really throw for 5,000 yards and 40-plus touchdowns. So I'm going to take that upside in round 6 and get a solidified quarterback who I know is one of the best in the league. But now I'm looking at a couple options here. I could go running back. I could go receiver. I'm looking down the board, and there's a couple guys that I don't think will come back to me. I'm going to take a chance on Tony Pollard here. I like to follow the money, and I think he's going to be a nice safety valve for the Tennessee Titans. I think he's going to be a dump-off king over there. I don't think they want Will Levis to throw for 30-plus attempts. So I think they'd like to run the ball a little bit. They chose to pay him. They had Tajay Spears, who showed flashes last year, but they chose to pay Tony Pollard. They paid him big money. I think he's one of the top 10 highest paid running backs in the league. So if they're paying him, I like to follow the money. There's no rookie behind him that I'm really worried about. They knew what they had with Tajay Spears and still paid him. So I think that's Tony Pollard's backfield. So this is something I don't really do. If you watched our mock shows before, I don't normally have 3 running backs by this point. So this is a little bit of a different team, but there was no receiver that was really screaming out to me. I thought about Christian Kirk, but I'm afraid he's going to get lapped by the second half of the season by Brian Thomas Jr. And I thought about Xavier Worthy, but targeting the Chiefs and Hollywood Browns there as well. Targeting the Chiefs receiver room is rolling the dice a little bit. And I have a Chief. I have, Travis Kelce. So I'm okay with taking a shot on Tony Pollard. And again, like Nick mentioned with these wrap plays, you do have to reach down the board a tiny bit if there's a guy that you do like, because he's not going to come back to you.
Yep, 100%. And right now, I do see someone that I've been screaming is a value. Like Nick mentioned, you follow the money, same team as Tony Pollard. Calvin Ridley gets absolutely paid by the Titans. I don't want to go into a full breakdown, but Brian Callahan, offensive vertical coach, Will Levis, gunslinger, Calvin Ridley should be the wide receiver one. I know they still have D-Hop and Tyler Boyd. Hop is injured right now. He's going to miss the first couple games, it looks like. So it's Calvin Ridley's team to kind of win over, and they get the Bears week 1. I'm looking for a second flex option, so it's possible he gets benched for better matchups from some of the other guys I take, or if we get some breakouts. But right now, I do think that is a great value. Now I have the option here. I either fill out the starting lineup and grab a quarterback, or I look for the first flex play. I'm looking at the rookies on the board. I like Coleman. I like Brian Thomas. These are 2 guys I've been targeting, but I already have Engram locked into my tight end position, James Cook locked into my starting lineup. So unless if that team absolutely breaks out, both of them can't score a touchdown on any single play. So I am going to fade them a little bit here. And I'm going to take someone that Nick has called a value and a great value in the draft, who I do agree with. Zach Moss, Cincinnati running back. You're going into Joe Burrow's elite offense, a team that's been at the top for the last 3 years now. Last season hindered a little bit by injuries, but you're plugging and playing for the RB6 in Joe Mixon. And Zach Moss, when he plugged in for Jonathan Taylor last year, had no problem finishing in the top 10 multiple times last year. So we'll see this late in the draft to get a starting running back on an elite offense is a great value. So I'm happy to take the shot there and kind of give somebody who I think has a pretty safe floor.
I was going to take Zach Moss if he did come back to me, but he didn't, and that's okay. Good pick by Nick. So I'm just going to double up on rookies here. I don't have a Bill. I don't have a Jaguar. I'm going to go with Keon Coleman, speedster out of Buffalo. Who's going to take up that Stephon Diggs role? It could be Keon Coleman, and then Brian Thomas. Again, they spent draft capital. These are both first or second round picks. I believe Brian Thomas was the first and Keon Coleman was the second. I think they traded out of the first, if I remember the draft correctly. But that's a guy that they wanted. So I'm going to go get guys, that these teams want. And these are quarterbacks that are paid big money. Trevor Lawrence just got a huge contract. Josh Allen obviously has a huge contract. So I'm okay with drafting 2 rookies and hopefully if one of these 2 breaks out, that's my second flex, by the way. If just one of these 2 breaks out, I have a stellar starting lineup, and I'm okay with that. And if both of them break out, then the league's in trouble.
Yeah, and I'm going to do what Nick did, too. I'm going to go back-to-back rookies as well. This might be kind of the shocker of the draft, but if you take a look at my team, which you can see here, I have the starters filled out. I have my flex guy. I have 4 receivers. I have 3 running backs. I do not think anybody that I pick in this range is going to very easily break my starting lineup. So why would I go ahead and take a guy for depth if I think I have a chance at 2 starters and 2 stars? I'm going to go back-to-back. I'm going to take the 101 in this year's draft, Caleb Williams, and the 102 in Jaden Daniels. I think both these guys are going to be really good. I think they both went into very good situations. Caleb, Nick talked about on the Hot Takes episode. We both think Caleb is going to be very good in a loaded offense. Jaden Daniels has been the buzz of Washington camp. Everybody on the team is saying he looks great. Cliff Kingsbury is saying he is phenomenal, and Cliff Kingsbury coached up Kyler Murray to multiple top 5 fantasy seasons. I think Jaden Daniels has has very high upside. In what's not a super strong defensive division, and not with one of the easier schedules in football. And I think he has a great formula. And on top of that, my guy Sauce Gardner told him he's going to be really freaking good. So if my guy Sauce is saying you're going to be good, I'm going to trust you year 1 for fantasy, and I'm going to play the matchup week to week. And like I said earlier, I think there's enough depth at the quarterback position this year, kind of more than ever, where I could go ahead and stream somebody if I don't feel either one of these guys is really cutting it.
as much as I do like Zach Moss, I think that backfield is a little bit open for battle, and there might be a little bit of a committee. So I'm going to take the handcuff of Chase Brown just to kind of see what happens. Round 11, he'd be my running back 4. I'm okay with taking that handcuff. And then I'm looking down the receiver board. There's really not anybody that I love. So I'm just going to take it. I mean, my options here, Xavier Legette with the Panthers playing with Bryce Young, or I'm looking at Mike Williams with Nick's New York Jets. Mike Williams is a big body receiver. I don't know what we're going to get out of Aaron Rodgers this year, but I've told people around me basically that like Rodgers is kind of like Brady or LeBron or any of those legends that we've kind of grew up with. Until I see that he doesn't have it, to me, he has it. And to me, he's still a top 5 quarterback in the league. Do I think he could throw for 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns at this point? No. I think he could throw for 4,000 yards and 35 touchdowns. It can't all go to Garrett Wilson. I'm going to take the shot on Mike Williams. And the Jets sneakily have a pretty good fantasy offense this year between Rodgers, who I think is a value if he is going to throw for a good chunk of yards, Mike Williams, Garrett Wilson, and Breece Hall, who I think could be my the running back 1. So I'm okay with that. He's riding my bench. He could end up being a flex guy. And if one of those 2 wide receivers that I took that are rookies, Keon Coleman and Brian Thomas, don't work out, I know that Mike Williams is a surefire guy as long as he is on the field.
I like it. I'll never say no to you boosting up my Jets.
There's no Zach Wilson anymore, so I can't. Unfortunately, I can't dog him.
Fair enough. So like I mentioned, I do think I have stars across my team at running back, wide receiver, flex. I think I got the depth. I don't think anyone's breaking my starting lineup early on in the year, so I'm going to target some rookies and hope that they break out and later in the year. Maybe Calvin Ridley slides off. Maybe Rashee Rice gets a midseason suspension, which would be unprecedented. So if it does happen, don't kill me if you took Rashee off my word. I'm going to take Xavier Legette. He is a little dinged up right now, so he's not going to be there for week 1 of the fantasy season. It doesn't look like, or for preseason at least. But I think that the talent's there. He's gotten a lot of good buzz out of camp. The Carolina offense is slightly better. You're looking at a new head coach who was the offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last year, who clearly worked for football and for fantasy. We watched Mike Evans, an explosive downfield receiver, continue his success, which, trust me, I'm not saying that's an offensive coordinator thing, but if you have a formula, go copy and paste it. So maybe your Xavier Legette can be that deep threat that Mike Williams, where it might only be 4 catches for 70 yards, but in that breakaway big touchdown, he kind of wins you a week, and I'm fine taking that later in my fantasy drafts. And then a guy I've been in on for probably 3 years now. I think his 2020 was his rookie season. Josh Palmer. I think he's easily going to be the wide receiver 1 for Justin Herbert, who I've said for years is a top 5 quarterback talent in real football. So I'm just going to bank on Jim Harbaugh, Justin Herbert. They get it done to who I think is the most talented wide receiver in the room.
So I just missed out on some quarterbacks, and that bums me out. I wanted to get Stafford or Kirk Cousins. I did miss out on both of them. I'm going to take Baker Mayfield, so I do have a backup, but I don't love it. The quarterbacks at this point that are available, it's really slim picking. So I'm looking back again. You make mistakes in your drafts. I wish I had had a better backup quarterback, but that's how it goes sometimes. So now I'm looking down the board and looking for rookies, looking for anybody that could have some upside. I'm going to go to receivers here, and I am going to go with Roman Wilson, as I think he might fill the Doug Baldwin role with Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson is not going to air it out anymore. His deep ball used to be really pretty. I'm not sure what the status of his arm is at this point later on in his career. But Russell Wilson did throw a lot of short passes to both Tyler Lockett and Doug Baldwin, especially Doug Baldwin, Golden Tate as well. I think Roman Wilson can fit that receiver mold that Russell Wilson does like to throw to. The other thing I have to be worried about with rookies is they might not really pan out till about week 8. Amon-Ra St. Brown was a league winner a couple of years ago. Jahmyr Gibbs overlapped David Montgomery last year. Then also worry about vets that might get lapped. Adam Thielen was a top 10 fantasy wide receiver last year through the first 8 weeks. And that my team was second in points behind Nick, and I think I had the best record or something like that. I was at the top of the board, and I missed the playoffs because I think I lost 6 of my last 7 matchups, and that's because both Adam Thielen and David Montgomery took hits, and those are my late round guys that really were shining. So you have to be very patient with your rookies. If you do have vets that are breaking out, or not breaking out, but that are, and you're riding them, try to trade them by the trade deadline if you think there's a chance they do get lapped.
I totally agree with you there. Like we've said, rookies break out late. If you were a guy like Nick who dropped Justin Jefferson early, fortunately got to pick him back up his rookie year. Took him 3 weeks before he really got situated, and then he was one of the best rookie wide receiver seasons ever. So
I wonder who I dropped him for. I dropped Justin Jefferson after week 1, and then I picked him up in week 3. I wonder who I dropped him
you can check our league history. It'll be there somewhere.
I'm sure. I'll do a deep dive.
So I don't have plenty of running back depth. Like I mentioned, I'm very confident in Saquon, James Cook, and then Zach Moss is kind of my filler. But I do think I need someone else. Looking at these guys,
Elijah Mitchell, McCaffrey goes down. That's always my favorite. That's always my favorite handcuff.
Well, actually, the rumor out of camp is that they have someone else that they're going to be treating as their RB2 over there, Elijah Mitchell.
I would go get whoever is the running back 2 for the 49ers.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm going to take a shot on Tyrone Tracy, New York Giants, rookie running back. I don't think Devin Singletary is very good, so I want someone that has a chance to break that starting lineup. And I'm in between 2 guys here. I have plenty of wide receiver depth, so I don't really need it. But I do think that Ricky Pearsall, he's gotten a lot of buzz out of camp, and the 49ers showing a willingness to trade Brandon Ayuk tells me that Ricky Pearsall is better than they thought out of the gate. And if Brandon Ayuk's on the move, I think Ricky Pearsall, you're going to watch his ADP skyrocket because the wide receiver 2 for the 49ers is a great role to have in your fantasy team. So I've got my eye on him. And then the other option is taking Tyler Algier, who got a lot of touches from Bijan, who stole a lot of touches from Bijan last year. Arthur Smith obviously out, but Tyler Algier was very talented. No Cordarrelle Patterson, so it is a 2-headed running back room in the 2 of those guys. So kind of in between the 2, and then obviously Nick and I, as we always say, you wait for your last 2 picks for defense and kicker. So I'm not even considering that at the moment. I think I'm going to take my shot on Pearsall because I don't think I think that there's a lot of opportunity for if Ayuk's traded, Pearsall is locked into my team for the rest of the season. There's practically no way that he gets cut with all the injury concerns and things like that, where I'm banking on an injury for Algier to be startable. Also, we know how waiver wires go. If Brandon Ayuk is not traded, I could cut Ricky Pearsall after week 1 and feel comfortable picking up whoever the top free agent running back was or the team that had the RB go down.
I'm taking a deep sleeper here. He is a rookie for the Bengals, Jermaine Burton. Maybe a good pick in both dynasty and keeper leagues, especially if T. Higgins is gone after this season. He's getting a lot of buzz from camp. And if any of those, they lost Tyler Boyd as well. So the wide receiver 3 slot for the Bengals is open. And that means if one of your wide receiver 1s or 2s goes down, that wide receiver 2 slot could end up being Jermaine Burton. So I'm okay around 14. Like I'm cool with that. I'm not upset about it. All right. Defense and kicker time. I will take the Cowboys defense because they play the Giants twice a year. They had a lot of sacks last year, a lot of turnovers. This is one I'd probably keep on my roster, and I'd probably pick up another one to stream week to week.
Sure. So bad radio, as we always do. I don't have the week 1 schedule in front of me. So as I pull it up, I'm looking for.
I think the Saints have the Panthers. I think that's been one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's always a good one. I do sneakily like the Jets, but the Jets are off the board already for week 1 against the 49ers. Brock Purdy throwing a ton of interceptions. Jets defense forces a ton of turnovers. The offensive line outside of Trent Williams is not great, and he is not at practice. So I'm just saying, calling my shot on my Jets defense to be the number 1 in fantasy. But looking at the board, I think I am going to go with, man, this is tough. I mean, I'm looking at the top defense is the Ravens. They face the Chiefs in opening night, which you never want to do. The Cleveland Browns, who are another top one. You get the Dallas Cowboys, who have been an electric offense. You know what? For radio purposes, we are going to slide down the board, and we are just going to take whoever against the Carolina Panthers, because that seems to always work. And then, of course, you fill out the starters. You get your kicker. I'm going to go with the highest scoring offense, or top 2 highest scoring offense kicker, Jason Sanders out of Miami.
And then I'm just waiting for my kicker to come around. All right. Don't like the options. I mean, a bunch of these kickers like aren't even like signed with teams, and that's because we're just like a lot of teams don't know who their kickers are. So I'm going to take Matt Gay for the Colts, but I'm not telling you to take Matt Gay because a lot of the teams that are going to score a lot of points don't even have their kickers yet. So, alrighty, Nick, what do you think of your team from the 12 slot, and what did you learn?
So I'm taking a look. I love my running back room. I love my wide receiver room. I love my depth at flex. I don't love having two rookie quarterbacks. Looking at how the rest of the board fell,
I think you probably should have taken Kirk Cousins or Stafford as
yeah,
a backup to
exactly,
Caleb.
exactly what I was thinking. I think I probably should have taken. I prefer Jaden Daniels over Caleb for fantasy. I probably should have taken Jaden Daniels, and I probably would have snatched up Gus Edwards if I could take that one back, and then the next round I would have went Xavier Legette and either Kirk Cousins or Matthew Stafford. But outside of that, I'm pretty ecstatic about how the draft felt to me. I'll be honest. I think that I have a very solid team. I'm very confident in my depth. I don't think anyone's breaking through my running back receiver flex room early on in the year outside of injuries. So I'm pretty ecstatic with how the draft felt to me. I'm not going to lie.
I think my team would be very competitive, and I think the two picks that it really relies on taking it from competitive to championship is Tony Pollard and Keenan Allen. I think I have a Pro Bowl roster. You're looking at Joe Burrow, Christian McCaffrey, Mike Evans, Keenan Allen, Travis Kelce. Those are all pro players. And then you're adding in Kenneth Walker and Tony Pollard, and then the rookies of Keon Coleman and Brian Thomas. Then my bench, a little bit of upside there with Chase Brown, Mike Williams, another rookie in Roman Wilson and Jermaine Burton. I don't like that I don't have a backup quarterback that I could trust, but that's okay. I sacrificed that for other talent. But if Keenan Allen ends up being the 1 or 2 with the Bears, and he does have another strong statistical season, I'm happy with that. And same thing with Tony Pollard. If following the money works and he still has a lot of talent and a lot of breakaway speed, then I think my team, I think I have a really, really solid starting roster, and I'll just have to really manage my waiver wire and my trades. And I think I'd be pretty happy with my team throughout the season. So if you enjoyed the show, let us know. Let us know what you thought of our mocks, maybe where you went wrong, or where you think we went right. If you're picking from one of these slots and need any advice, let us know on our social media channels. You can find us on PrimeTime FF Pod, Twitter and Instagram, Facebook or PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. You can even comment on the YouTube. I don't always get back to the YouTube comments within 24 hours since they don't always come through in a notification, but you can also comment on the YouTube video if you have any questions as well. So make sure you subscribe to us on all social media platforms. Make sure you're subscribed on any audio streaming podcast platforms and our YouTube channel as well. Make sure that bell icon is hit so you get notifications every time we do go live. That's very important coming up. And anytime we do post a new video on our YouTube channel. Thank you all for watching. We hope that you enjoyed Mock Draft 3.0, and we'll talk to you guys very soon.